Hello, welcome to a look at how the art of Cosmic Corsairs got made. I'm Craig Campbell. I'm the designer of the game and the publisher at NerdBurger Games, and I am here with Carly AF, who did all of the artwork in the whole game book and will be doing more art in supplements and things down the road. Hello, Carly. Thank you for
Hello.
agreeing to pop in and talk about your art.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The basics of it is for those who don't know, the way this typically runs is an art director, in this case me, because I fill a lot of roles at Nerdburger. An art director writes individual descriptions of what the art, what each piece of art should look like. So, um, some art directors get very, very detailed. Some might be less detailed. I'm curious to hear what Carly has to say about my art direction, such as it is. We have a lot of back and forth, so I think a lot of stuff gets solved in discussion in sketches, and I try to keep the art direction from getting too detailed because I like to have an artist really be able to put their stamp on it and really be able to kind of imagine based on everything they know about the game and what's in the art order. So I'm going to hand this over to Carly to start to kind of get into as soon as I show you this, which is kind of where we started with some of the earliest artwork. So, Carly, let's talk about how we kind of got the triarchy to look the way they did.
Okay. So the influences for this are sort of naval, because we're doing like a sort of pirates, like solar pirates, space pirates. We kind of wanted that sort of Age of Sail romance look. So you have like this sort of rich, controlling empire. So in this case, it's like the British Empire, basically, with like the sea power. So I wanted something really luxurious. So all like the blue and then like the gold and all this kind of like sort of gold colored accent that they have that then you see in the ships as well. So to give them like a really strong like visual look, like everything about them is like powerful and like luxurious. And then you can contrast that with like the rebels who are obviously kind of scrappy and all their ships are made differently. And so it's just kind of to give them a really strong sort of feel of like this big, powerful like group. Um, and I wanted to give them, so we started off with the blue, but then we kind of added in a little bit of iridescence. So they've got this kind of shimmer, which you see in their ships as well. They have that kind of blue tint going on with like the gold contrasting. And then all the kind of little details, like the little badges, and even things like the command stripes and things. You want something really, like really strong that's going to stand out. So even if they're like really small in the illustration, the idea is that you can still see like who's in charge. So you have these like big powerful figures and they have like the mantles, which is kind of something we did. Like you'll see a few of them throughout the game. They have these big like gold mantles or like command mantles. And it's kind of based on, like the epaulets that you see in these old uniforms. It's kind of like a futuristic sort of space version of that. But I wanted to do something that was kind of space, but also it has still that classic feel of like something fantasy or from like somewhere far away, like a different time. So you have sort of, I don't want it to be like a cold space vibe, if you see what I mean. It's supposed to be kind of like Age of Sail and sort of adventure and this sort of very like luxurious thing. So they have a lot of like engraved pieces and gold and then sort of masks to make them look really sinister. Like a lot of the foot soldiers have those like masks over them. Yeah. So the
Um,
idea is to give them this kind of this particular like vibe. So they have this whole you can always tell who they are and where they are, and they're very like a big faceless group. Quite
very,
intimidating.
very, very uniform and very imposing all the time.
Yeah.
And so some of the artwork that came out of this, we kind of started with this big full page piece that you'll see in the book that's early in the book, which is two starships and battling. And, Carly started with sketches and did like a few different angles. So I had a description of like, we're on a triarchy ship, we're looking down at a rebel ship, or vice versa. We want to be on one of the ships, right? Um,
Hmm.
and so that was one take, and then this is another one. You'll see um, this take kind of turned into what we ended up going with, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then there was another one that was kind of like this, which you got to see a lot more of the deck. And these were all just general sketches, and Carly would kind of hone down into something, which she ultimately did with this. And you'll see here we got the mantle on the captain's shoulders. You can't see the stripes on the soldiers' cuffs, but those are there, like we saw in the earlier sketches, and you'll see in other illustrations as well. And this actually started as a crivid, which is like the slug people with the kind of the very alien look. And I realized that I all of a sudden had two different crivid captains. I didn't have like, and I had a Gartaki captain, and I didn't have an Orin captain, and I wanted an Orin. So I had Carly change the species of the captain by changing the head and hands.
He got a
Um,
facelift last minute.
but underneath that cloak, he's still crivid. And then this is, here's an illustration that kind of shows this was the crivid with the mantle, and then the soldiers with the stripes on their cuffs. And at this point too, Carly was developing the triangular triarchy logo symbol, which then
Yeah, it's
got
like their motif.
expanded out into a little more, and also kind of pops up in the books as a resistance symbol is to tear that triarchy triangle in half. So you'll see at various points in the book there are characters who are wearing half triangles on their clothes to just to identify themselves as resistance, or there might be something on the wall that identifies an establishment as being friendly to resistance fighters. And so like officers having the mantles, and then the enlisted personnel having the cuff stripes. And then we got into species, which was actually probably the most fun of everything that we did, because that's going to, the characters are at the center of things. So we want to see what all these different species look like. So Carly, if you want to talk a little bit about your approach on at least a few of these, and then we'll show you some finished, some
So,
sketches and some finished work.
yeah, so the art orders for this were fairly like descriptive of key points. So you have like some fun like info to go off of. But then as you see in like the sketches, I tried a few different variations initially just to kind of give some options. So like different scales for the characters, how they might kind of look, what sort of things that they would wear, and like what sort of weapons they would have, and trying to figure out like, sort of how they would work together like on a spaceship, like what kind of stuff they would need, how, what do they wear for their particular kind of biology, sort of do they have like cultures and styles and fashion. So it's like super fun to kind of do. Um, and then I wanted to have them quite different, so their silhouettes are always different. You can tell them apart quite easily, and it's really fun to give them like as like a species a little kind of like a thing that they have, which obviously you can change if you're having a character. You can have, not every character in the same species is going to be exactly the same, but to just give them like little cultural things so that they feel like a like specific group, if you see what I mean. So like the Skrullis, they're always having like really decorated things. They're quite flashy. They're quite fun to draw. They've got these big like piratey kind of cloaks, and so it's fun to kind of figure out how they would wear stuff. Because they've got those big tails, so they can't really have tailored stuff. So you give them like these flowy cloaks, and then they're kind of decorating it all, and they're getting all stylish with it. And then you can contrast that. So you've got like the Gartaki are really kind of like serious. They're kind of stony looking. I don't know if that was the plates were in the initial order, and then I think I kind of like emphasized it on some of the sketches. So sometimes things would develop a little, and I would like go one way with things, and then we would adjust or kind of go with something. So they came very kind of a serious, kind of stony people, and all their like gear is very practical. They're not out here with like flashy coats and things. Um, and then like the fish down the bottom. This one had a few variations. So I gave it like very kind of jellyfish kind of like with some sort of squid things. And you can see in the middle that became a lot more like tentacly and the mane. And then like one of the options, sometimes I would do like a weird option. So one of the options was this tiny little blob guy who would then be like, he would, the idea was that he would be really dense and then he would like tiny and then he would like spread out to be this like massive, scary looking thing. But in the end, we went with, in the end, we went with like the little guy in the middle who's all tentacly. Um, and like you'll see on a few of the pictures, they have like little kind of jewelry that they wear. They have this little like amulet. So the idea is that they have like these little cultural things that you might see, and those motifs sometimes come through on like their ships or their weapons as well. It's just to give them like a flavor for each thing. The idea is that, there's something more to them than not just like different shapes. They have like little personality type things. The crivid were quite fun, like try to figure out like what they would wear as well, because they're like squishy slugs. So it's like you end up thinking some strange questions like, do they wear shoes? Like, do they know what shoes are? Or I think in the end we went with them not really like they have little foot wraps to protect their little sluggy feet, but not all of them wear shoes because like maybe they don't really understand shoes because they're just kind of like making the shape of a person. So they're kind of getting it, but like they've not really got it. Like
Yeah, and I
they
see
kind
like,
of
a lot of the clothing that they wear is, I don't know if this was intentional, but I noticed it and encouraged it, which was that nothing looks like heavy, bulky, like it would be uncomfortable. Like it's all very light.
Yeah,
Because
I
like
think
you're
I was
imagining them as being
imagining
these
that
kind of sluggy creatures that like if you put something really kind of heavy and hard to move
like it
in,
would just
they would
sink
find
through
it
and they'd be like, "Ooh."
incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Um,
so they ended up with this kind of quite light kind of look. The idea that naturally they're not wandering around in heavy gear because they just don't do that. Whereas the Oran, they have a lot more gear. They're more like people, like humans. So they have like coats and styles and they've got all their gear and stuff. So it's just kind of fun to kind of figure out like what they would wear. Like and the Ikraks as well, they don't wear tons of clothes either because they've kind of got their little like carapace there. So they have their little harnesses with their gear and they have like their little bits. Like I gave them a leafy cloak, like a sort of thing that is embroidered like a leaf. The idea that, they come from this kind of foresty planet, so they would have things that reflect their like home worlds, like little bits, but they don't walk around with tons of armor on because they've kind of got their own. So it's
yeah,
kind of like
exactly.
fun little things that you can like add in just to give them like their own personality. And then obviously like players can like run with that or do an opposing one if they wish, or it's just to give them like some kind of fun vibes because the idea is that they are all these little characters and like you say they make the kind of story. That's the whole sort of point of them.
Yep. And it's described pretty clearly in the book that, there are commonalities amongst each of these species, but certainly players are welcome to kind of add their own variations because there's a lot of variety in any species.
Mm.
Genetics is just going to be that way. There's going to be a lot of variation. Like here's where we ended up. These were the initial sketches for the Ikraks with some notes about them. We ultimately ended up going with the one in the lower right,
Mhm.
because I liked that one had wings and six appendages, whereas Ikraks are normally the standard Ikraks is no wings and just two legs and two arms, and they can gain metamorphoses, which allows them to add these other things to them.
Mhm.
So I wanted some of the species illustrations to indicate like, oh, this is an Ikrax who has those things. Um, and then the Skrell, where I think might have been the first, were they the first ones you did?
think Yeah, I think so. These were definitely like first or one of the early few,
Yeah, and we
but then
started with,
yeah.
like she said, the very, fancy coats and everything. And that was all descript. That was all part of their style. Is they as a people they like ornate dress. They're very much about decoration.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Lots of kind of pointy shapes as well, like fang shapes and
yeah,
like triangles and things. Yeah.
scales and crests and
Yeah, just
claws
kind of
and
like, and you see that in their ships as well. Their ships have got those kind of shapes in them as well, because and like engraved bits.
and there's the Akrax that we ended up with,
Hmm.
and the Skrell. These are on the pages where the each of the species is described. And then there was just kind of a little in the middle of all of this, wanted to show the characters using channelings, using their powers, their essentially magic or superpowers or whatever you want to call them. And so this was a character that had an ability that allowed them to create a stone fist and to also shoot like a beam at a foe, and so we ended up with a few different variations of that. Um, and so with those types of things, it's just, Carly would vary the gender and the look of the individual, vary the viewpoint a little bit, and kind of ultimately end up with this. This is what ends up in the book,
Mhm.
the final version. So you can see like there's a lot going on. This particular character is using a lot of powers. And then there was the map of the solar system, which my art order for this was very different from what we ended up with, where Carly suggested this layout, which I thought was pretty ingenious because we've got um an asteroid field that's running kind of right through the middle there in the fifth orbit. There's four planets and then the asteroid field, and that allowed this orientation, this layout like this allowed that asteroid field to be the only thing that orbits that's in the crease between the two-page layout. It's in the spine. So if you
Yeah.
lose a couple of things in the spine, you're not losing any planets. And then we toyed around with different ways to have we got all this space in here so we can have a table for travel times and all that sort of thing. So we blocked out some things for that sort of thing. Ultimately ended up with this, which in the book, also in the lower left, has a table applied to it that shows travel times. Um, and we've got, the verge, that big inky blackness around the outside there, which we will get a chance to explore down the road sometime. There's things happening there. We just don't get to see them right now. Um, and then the starships. I'm going to hand this to Carly again because this came like hand in hand almost with the species, was like trying to make sure that some of the starships had that were they had there were different styles and the styles reflected the species.
Yeah. So the art orders for the triarchy were quite imposing. So I was looking at stuff like combining kind of modern battleships, like these big blocky forms, but I also wanted to bring in like sort of classic nautical paintings, like pirate adventure. So you kind of want to mix the two. And then yeah, when I was drawing all the initial sketches for the characters, I would do like little doodles of shapes of the ships as well. Because when you're figuring out how they look, you want to figure out how they would live as well. Like what kind of ship would they have? Like how would it suit them? And how their clothing and everything would reflect through. So like the same kind of shapes or like little quirks on their ships that would be unique to that species. So like the Skrullis are really flashy. They have these kind of very angular ships with lots of curves on. So kind of inspired by this kind of, I think this is a Dao in the bottom center with like these shapes that are very kind of spiky and fangy. So the idea is that they're very adventurous. This is kind of a ship and they would go blasting through and just sort of very everything pointy and sort of fierce for them. And then above, I looked at different types of ships, like really weird ones as well, like weird shapes. These kind of weird round ones. You see these for like the Vesh, I think. I think the Krivid maybe as well, but also like the cargo ship. So they have that kind of, you see those like girders that are all sort of interlinked. You see a cargo ship later that has this, because I thought it looked a little bit kind of like something insecty, like a kind of nest. So I think in some of the it cracks they have like a little cargo ship thing. So they have this kind of weird configuration of like lattices and stuff in the back. And the idea is to just bring in little bits, like to imagine how a species would design their own spaceship, well, solar ship to like suit them. And so to not have everything look the same, and the idea being like if you can see them tiny, you can see the differences. So in the same way that the characters or their silhouettes would be very distinct, the same way for the ships, hopefully as well. So if you saw them in the distance, like or small on the illustration, you could tell like who was coming, basically,
Yeah,
to
and
give
we
it
have
a
a few
face.
illustrations like that where there's for example, a triarchy warship very far in the distance. But
Mm.
you can tell what it is because they have a very distinctive kind of
Yeah, they
battleship
have these like
shape.
slab ships that are just like these huge, kind of massive, kind of triangular prows and very like aggressive shapes, very like smooth, like these yeah, like big massive slabs basically coming in. So you see those in the sketches initially on the left. We kept some of those shapes for them and then kind of developed them because they have different kind of sizes and things that you provided orders for and like different types of ships that they would use. And you see here the gold sails as well. That's like a big theme in the book. Those became like the gold accents that they have on their uniforms, and the idea that like these are solar sails that already exist. So it's really fun to bring that into the game as well. And so you see it in the illustrations that the Triarchy, they have like these beautiful ones and everything is like up to date, and like the idea maybe that is that they have all of the manufacturing or the shipyards. And then you can see that the rebels often have sails that are like really patched and like disgusting looking. So theirs is like kind of made of little bits that maybe they stole bits or they've like scrapped things, and it's all kind of patchy and like a bit scrappy because they don't have the same level of like resources at all. So you can build in like little storytelling bits into the design of things that can help players, give them something fun to go off, or just kind of emphasize like story points as well. So yeah, it's fun.
And so here's some of what we ended up with. Um, these heavy haulers.
Yeah, so you see these have like insecty shapes as well with the it cracks. There's all their thing is insecty, so that
Got,
everything is kind of like shell-like, or they have like little wing forms going on. And then it's really fun because then you get all kinds of weird, crazy spaceships.
got
So
the little honeybee um,
yeah, and they have like, and you
hexagonal
see on their,
hive windows.
yeah, on their
And
character illustration,
the
you
hexes
can
are
see
kind of
little,
in the hull of the ship as well. Like they were
yeah,
built in panels that were hex like a hex
yeah,
grid.
their whole thing is like a little beehive, and you see on the little illustration of the character, they've got a little cubby hole behind them, and it's like a little beehive as well. So they have like a whole insecty hive coming in, and it's really fun to bring that into the artwork and just have these little bits. So everyone's got their own kind of flavor going on. So
We had like a big transport ship that we envisioned as, this is like a big, almost luxury transport. This is going to be like a cruise ship in space. So it's a
mm.
very clean design. And then we got, um,
So the Vesh have
she
got
had a lot of fun with different weird blobby shapes and tentacle shapes and things for the Vesh, who are those blobby tentacle people.
yeah, they have a lot of like marine kind of things. The idea maybe they live in water or a watery kind of planet. So all their stuff is kind of amoeba or like weird little sea creatures going on. So, but yeah,
Um,
lots of natural
and
shapes.
here's a page in there, some of the ones that we just saw, and then the warship kind of in the middle. And there's a warship there, and then that smaller frigate, like it's like a triarchy frigate, like a scout ship up on
Mhm.
top. And then there's the second from the bottom is the Skrell ship she was talking about with all the pointy bits and kind of um,
It's kind of like an adventure. It's got a bit of a
lizardy
Viking
elements.
thing. Yeah, it's very like pointy and sharp.
And then we get into the cover, which
Yes.
was probably the longest of my art orders, and I tend to be pretty free and open. I love to see Carly or any artist kind of generate all sorts of cool ideas. And I tend not to um, require, to sit there and fight and get kind of nitpicky over a lot of illustrations. As long as it generally does what I'm looking for, I want the artist style to shine through. But with the cover, I tend to get a little more picky. So we went back and forth a few times
Oh,
on this
I
to just
think
kind of finalize a few things. Um,
I think that's always expected. Like the cover is kind of like the main thing. It's what you're going to see the most
yeah.
of. So I think with any project, you always expect to spend like longer on that one, and it's always like adjusting and making changes is a part of any project. So it's like a conversation about it, and it's kind of fun to develop it together and sort of get to where you end up.
So we needed a sword fight on board a starship, three different versions of that, kind of in the center there. The right side is what we ended up going with, and we can show you that a little bigger um, here in a minute. But there was, here were the ones that we kind of went. This one almost won. This was like my second favorite because I really liked the kind of almost like the motion line action that's happening on the right, where our hero captain is like that whatever's going on behind them is very likely in space, but it feels like their motion.
Yeah,
It feels like they're active.
it's like some drama. Like,
This is the one that actually ultimately ended up being the cover because the motion lines were beat out just slightly by how the weapons were clashing and having the big kind of fly of sparks and light and everything there. Although we changed the Krivid soldier's hammer into two swords to get a little more piratey, to make sure they both had kind of cutlass type swords. And then there was another one that was just a slightly different variation on that. And This is what we ultimately ended up with a big space on top to be able to put the game title and some space on the bottom to do the bylines. Um, and there was a lot of little back and forth on this to kind of show the railing in the background, to show how the sail anchor point is happening, to kind of to make sure that it's clear you're on a starship.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of other stuff in space. People can be on space docks and space stations, and there can be moon bases and other platforms out in space and mining colonies and things like that. And wanted to kind of make it clear that we were definitely on a starship. So we needed a sail. And that was the cover, and that's kind of the rundown of where all this came from, and how we kind of got to where we got with some of the art. There's a whole bunch more in the game book. Carly, again, thank you so much, for doing all of this and for agreeing way back, like well over a year ago, to not only do this game but then potentially, like, you're on the hook for supplements for other products. So we're going to explore all sorts of other stuff, which we are actually starting to do right now. We're kind of
We
moving
are,
to the
yeah.
next thing.
It's super fun. You
Um,
kind of create a thing and then it keeps going and you can keep adding to it. So it's really fun. You're kind of creating a whole universe. So
and I'm looking forward to, um, each book that comes after this is going to explore like another corner of the universe, and you're going to start seeing more ways that you can fight back against the triarchy. It doesn't all just have to be blowing stuff up in space with starships and stuff. Like
well, that's fun, but yeah.
there's going to be internal political things that you can do. There'll be, spy games and tradecraft and espionage and stuff. And there's going to be robots and androids at some point. There's, a mysterious planet that we are going to explore eventually, with some strange stuff happening there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you, Carly, for joining me. I hope you who watched this enjoyed getting a look at how the artwork of Cosmic Corsairs came into being.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Carly.
No.
Bye, everybody.